Hi, hello, we're watching a bunch of horror movies in the public domain. Don't want to spend too much time on this intro. In this episode, we're going to be watching some pretty spooky movies. It's got Vincent Price, it has a Japanese monster movie, it also has one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Let's go! The Gorilla, not to be confused with the Ape, is a comedy vehicle for the Ritz Brothers, a vaudeville comedy trio that I don't really know that well. The plot concerns a killer gorilla, who's introduced through a pretty funny montage at the start, who threatens the life of a rich man, played by Universal Monster Movie regular Lionel Atwill. He then calls upon three bumbling detectives, played by the Ritz Brothers, to help protect him from the gorilla.
What's eating you?
Bela Lugosi plays a supporting role as the butler, where he does a pretty decent tongue-in-cheek performance playing off the brothers. He has a few funny moments of his own, too.
Now listen, you!
The whole Ritz Brothers' bit gets tiring after a while. They don't have defined personalities like the Three Stooges. They're what the Stooges would be if every member was curly. Humor is really subjective, and this isn't really a comedy classic for a reason, but it is worth a look if it seems like something you'd like. Despite some of the annoying bits, I actually kind of like this one. Check it out. House on Haunted Hill is a film from director and producer William Castle, a man known for implementing cheap gimmicks into his movies. The gimmick for this movie was to have a skeleton fly around the theater. Since you can't really replicate that experience anymore, I'll do the best I can to bring it to a home viewing experience. The film follows a group of people staying the night at a haunted house, where they will be awarded money if they survive till morning. The game is being run by Frederick and Annabelle Lauren, and they both like to threaten each other in a jovial manner.
That isn't funny, Frederick.
Make a good headline. Playboy kills wife with champagne cork.
What I don't understand is why the contestants don't just stay in their rooms and wait the night out. It's not like their reward money is going to be split up, they'll all get $10,000 regardless. But because a movie needs to happen, they decide to be stupid and leave their rooms anyways. Nora especially just seems like out of her mind. Her reactions to everything are priceless. She's hysterical. The film has a playful energy to it. Vincent Price absolutely steals the show here. He's just in love with this script and he sells the macabre lines he's given.
There'll be food and drink and ghosts, and perhaps even a few murders. I think everyone wonders what they would do if they saw a ghost. And now my wife has given us all the opportunity to find out.
It's a very imperfect movie, but it has a lot of entertainment value through often intentional means rather than unintentional ones. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, it knows what it is, and it just has fun with it. There are a couple spooky people roaming the halls, there's a sentient rope, an acid pit in the basement, and even a spooky, scary skeleton. What's not to love? Very fun movie. Hunchback of Notre was an 1831 novel written by Victor Hugo, and in 1923 it saw its first full-blown Hollywood adaptation, though it's not the first definitive adaptation period. The film stars Lon Chaney Sr. as Quasimodo, a deformed man living in the Cathedral of Notre Dame. Mocked and jeered by the people below, one day he is allowed to participate in the Festival of Fools, where he is further humiliated before being saved by a Romani woman named Esmeralda. They went all out for this production. The sets are absolutely outstanding, and the cast of extras seems to be in the hundreds. There's just so much to appreciate about the production design of this movie. Lon Chaney's performance as Quasimodo is incredible. He's able to convey so much visually about his character, and his character's introduction even showcases his acrobatic skill. It's an insanely physically demanding, kinetic performance, and he's so impressive, and it makes the ending all the more cruel. An extremely ambitious film for its time, Hunchback of Notre Dame is worth seeing. From one Lon Chaney family production to the next, and unfortunately it's not a fun transition. With a poster like this, you know Indestructible Man is going to be a doozy. Also, gonna be real, I spent most of this movie slightly intoxicated. Now witches. No witches? Is it an anti-witch establishment? Lon Chaney Jr. had it rough in his post-Universal years, starring in cheapo productions made to turn a quick buck, and yeah, Indestructible Man is one of those movies. Chaney plays a death row inmate who is allowed to be experimented on after his execution. The experiment revives him, and he becomes an indestructible man. A narrator explains all this, and it's really unnecessary.
Towards the end of this case, Captain Lauder and I found out the doctor and his assistant had been murdered.
It's supposed to be reminiscent of film noir, but it's a hodgepodge of genres, and it doesn't quite work.
Pull off the armored car holdup. And then Lowe continued with his confession. He told us about...
And then he continued to do the thing.
Gotta say though, at least he's not the Yucca Flats narrator. He's actually speaking in complete sentences.
Touch a button, things happen.
Even if he is explaining things that can be inferred from just watching the movie.
Francine, I just thought of something.
Yeah?
Eva agreed to let Francine do the show.
The stuff with the investigator feels weirdly disconnected from the Lon Chaney storyline. It's like they shot two different movies and tried to stitch them together halfway through production, using narration as a sort of awkward glue. Lon Chaney doesn't have any lines in this movie after his execution, so I gotta wonder if that's because he's supposed to be a mute monster, or because he's asked to be paid per line and they opted to just narrate his scenes. And they kept using the same two close-ups of him quivering in front of the camera in place of a reaction. It's really weird. It's a hastily constructed flick. It's like it's about to fall apart at the seams. What the hell happened here?
Okay, we need to go back, because the weird way they froze in front of each other. I need to see that again. Because it's like they've reached the end of their blocking and they just stop.
Also, what the fuck is that ending? The investigator basically just says, hey, I got you fired, so you can be my housewife, and it's treated like a good thing.
What did you do that for?
I figured that being my wife would take up all of your time.
Even if I wanted to say no, I couldn't. You're not supposed to say no to a detective.
I figured that, too.
Like, yeah, babe, I just took all of your agency from you. It's sadly very indicative of the time that this was considered a happy ending.
Why does no one in these movies have peripheral vision?
Because it was in 4x3. There wasn't enough room.
Invisible Ghost is another Monogram Lugosi movie. But, and this is a real shock, it's actually pretty good. Lugosi plays Mr. Kessler, who wants his wife to return to him. It turns out his wife is still alive, but is seemingly a little loopy after a car accident and is being looked after by a man named Jules. Kessler's daughter is also engaged to a suitor named Ralph, who has a history with the house's maid. One night, Kessler sees his wife out the window, and this puts him under a trance that leads him to the maid's bedroom, where he kills her. The rest of the movie follows the characters as they try to figure out who the killer is, and why Kessler is put under a spell that becomes less and less effective as he starts to be freed from it mid-crime. The movie introduces a lot right out of the gate, but I can't say it isn't interesting. Under the direction of Joseph H. Lewis instead of William Nye, who did the other Monogram movies, except for The Corpse Vanishes, we've actually got some more quality filmmaking here, with some spooky lighting and purposeful camera work. I especially like the use of sound. The scene of Kessler's first murder uses diegetic music in a way that's pretty unsettling.
Why, Mr. Kessler.
The scene where the butler finds Kessler's second victim has a notable lack of sound. The deafening white noise as the camera slowly trucks down is effectively creepy. This film shows a range to Lugosi's acting that I haven't seen since Dracula. He's able to quickly change between a charismatic and comforting host to a menacing killer. One thing that isn't clearly explained is how exactly the hypnosis happens. It's kind of arbitrarily hand-waved as being connected to Mrs. Kessler, and the ending is lame as a result, but it's a surprisingly engaging film. I was hanging on every plot development because the film managed to hook me. It's proof that a low-budget Monogram movie isn't always going to be a stinker. It's a proper thriller, one could say. Invisible Ghost is pretty good. I recommend it.
Who would do a thing like that?
The Killer Shrews, another creature feature. This film opens on a very similar narration to the giant Gila monster.
Shrew feeds only by the dark of the moon. He must eat his own body where no human ever goes, and no life is ever seen.
Because, surprise, it's from the same director, Ray Kellogg. What do you think his favorite cereal is? Anyways, it's about two guys who travel to an island house, where the rest of the film takes place. There are two sets, one is a living room and one is a hallway, and actually there's a basement, and it's where an experiment on shrews is being conducted, to increase their size for the betterment of science or something. Predictably, the shrews are very aggressive and start attacking the house. The black guy dies first, of course.
There are 200 or 300 giant shrews out there.
Yeah, and we won't see more than 4 or 5 per shot. Then a bunch of randomly generated shrew events start happening, and there's a lot of talking in rooms. A lot of talking in rooms. Eventually they hatch a very dumb but practical plan to escape the island. Yeah, this is another dull monster movie, but sometimes something amusing happens.
Creamy sugar.
I can't keep talking about this movie without discussing the elephant in the room. Or rather, the doggy in the rat costume. The Killer Shrews are so blatantly just dogs they've dressed up, and it adds a bunch of unintentional comedy when the supposedly ferocious hellbeasts are just chaotically sniffing the actors to death. There's this one horrible editing mistake. I don't know where else to include this in this discussion, but at some point the modern home video release of this film got completely fucked up for one scene. So it happens right after Mario here gets bitten by a shrew. There's a shot of the actors walking to the door of the basement to investigate, and then it cuts back. At some point between the MST3K episode and the most recent transfer, the sequence turned into this. For some reason, this mistake is present in the colorized version of the movie too. I don't know what happened here. The Killer Shrews is mostly boring and it has a handful of funny bits related to the dogs, but I would not recommend watching this by yourself. Find yourself a group of friends. If you don't have any friends, then kidnap some, and have fun.
An excellent example of overpopulation.
I'm not going to worry about overpopulation just yet.
King of the Zombies is a horror comedy that basically feels like a more comedic white zombie. It follows 3 guys who find themselves stuck in the middle of the jungle, and they meet a Bela Lugosi stand-in who has a colony of voodoo zombies. Anyways, I can't in full confidence say this whole movie's worth watching. There are some poorly aged bits. But the black guy of the trio, played by Manton Moreland, is genuinely very funny.
If I ain't no zombie, and there is, what am I doing here?
Hey, where you going?
There's just something about his delivery that makes him extremely likable.
Eyes, if you look, I ain't responsible for nothing you sees.
He undercuts any tension of the scene he's in, but that honestly just makes it funnier.
Move over, boys. I'm one of the gang now.
Funny-ass performance in a movie that's otherwise just fine.
I was digging in a graveyard. Can you imagine me digging in a graveyard?
What about the graveyard?
No, that couldn't have been me.
Go listen to some Manton Moreland party records. Genuinely funny guy. Before Will Smith in I Am Legend and Charlton Heston in The Omega Man, there was Vincent Price in The Last Man on Earth, the first adaptation of the 1954 novel I Am Legend, written by Richard Matheson. Set 3 years after an apocalyptic plague that infected the entire Earth's population, the lone immune survivor, Dr. Robert Morgan, spends his days preparing for night, and his nights fighting off the vampiric zombies that want him dead. We spend a lot of time with Morgan, seeing his daily routine and how he copes with the hopeless situation he is in. A large section of the movie taking place in a flashback just before the apocalypse.
I wish somebody would find a vaccine.
And the film eventually reveals there may be hope for him yet, if fleeting. This is one of Vincent Price's more vulnerable performances. The film spends a lot of time with him just going about his daily routine, which he approaches with haggardness. The vampiric zombies he faces are real spooky too. They sleep during the day, are repelled by garlic and mirrors, and can be dispatched by being staked through the heart. But they move in packs and shuffle around like zombies. It's a unique mix of mythos. What's more, they call out Morgan's name.
Morgan! We're going to kill you, Morgan!
While I think characterless threats can be scarier, having a whole pack of monsters single out one guy, some of whom being people he used to know, adds to the psychological torture he must be feeling, and makes the viewer sympathize with Morgan more. Normally, an internal monologue in one of these public domain movies is a bad sign, especially if it's trying to bridge the gap between unconnected scenes, but not only is the fact that it's narrated by Vincent Price friggin' awesome, but the information being delivered is more of a stream of consciousness that helps the viewer further connect with Morgan as a character. And of course he's not gonna speak all of this out loud.
This convertible would be nice. Probably handles well. But I can't think of comfort.
I don't have any problems with this movie. Most of them boil down to nitpicky stuff like cheesy ADR work.
You take care of your life, I'll take care of mine.
There's also an action set piece towards the end of the film that I don't think Vincent Price is physically built for, but that's spoiler territory, and this movie's just so good that it's worth seeing for yourself. Don't watch it with the Mill Creek transfer though. The frame is horribly cropped. This goes without saying for most of these films shot on a wider aspect ratio, but yeah, it's especially true for this one. The HD widescreen version is free and readily available. Hell, it's available on the Wikipedia page, so watch that version. This is an absolute must-watch public domain film. From the Last Man to the Last Woman. This Roger Corman-directed flick has a screenplay written by Robert Towne, who also stars as a simp for the titular Last Woman. Noticing a pattern here. This film was also released in color, so I'm going to be using that for this video. Also, gotta say, seeing a movie in color after all these black and white movies is like getting flashbanged. Or nuked. The film follows a couple and their lawyer. The wife is on shaky terms with her husband, and the lawyer, played by Robert Towne, starts appealing to her more. After a short scuba diving session, the three of them discover they might be the last people on Earth following a sudden incident they missed. The two remaining men then proceed to fight over the girl. There are some good script writing moments here. Having the film open on a cockfight, animal abuse aside, is a clever way of foreshadowing what's about to happen. And there is some decent banter here, but the film is really low energy and I wasn't in the mood for it. By no means a terrible movie, I wasn't terribly interested either.
Let's go home.
Another Roger Corman movie. The Little Shop of Horrors is a farcical black comedy. Seymour, a meek florist, discovers a weird Venus flytrap-looking plant and nicknames it Audrey Jr., named after the daughter of the flower shop owner he has a crush on. He discovers that it grows when fed blood, but with that growth comes a bigger appetite.
Feed me!
Eventually, Seymour starts feeding it human bodies, and the owner starts to get suspicious of his activities. But he's willing to turn a blind eye as long as it's making money. This film radiates goofball energy. It's a gag-a-minute comedy. The dialogue is often overlapping and snappy.
Ever see this man?
Man, see picture.
Why are you so nervous?
Got a guilty conscience?
No, why should I?
It's a cheap movie, but the production values and plotting feel slapped together in a way that adds to the comedy. It's hard to explain, but it works. There's this swagger to the way the characters speak, and it's very funny.
Take it easy, Dracula. What do you think I'm carrying here, my dirty laundry?
There are too many weird, funny moments and lines to count. There's famous B-movie actor Dick Miller, who, inexplicably, is a connoisseur of flowers.
They are all right. Well, I've had better.
There's the random scalpel fight in the dentist office. There's the dentist character himself, who's an absolute psycho.
Oh, you are going to get it!
There's even this great scene with a very young Jack Nicholson who plays a sadomasochist.
Oh my God, don't stop now!
Yet another example of Roger Corman giving work to artists who would go on to have very successful careers.
Here's Johnny!
For something allegedly slapped together in 5 days using pre-existing props and sets, it's a pretty damn good movie. Also, it would be foolish of me to not mention the musical and subsequent remake that was later released in 1986, directed by Frank Oz. The remake isn't in the public domain, so I won't spend too much time on it, but it is absolutely worth seeing.
Feed me, Carbon! Feed me now!
It's an update of the original story that feels similar enough in spirit, but is creative enough to have its own endearing identity.
Just because you put a strange and interesting plant in the window, people don't suddenly...
Excuse me, I couldn't help noticing that strange and interesting plant.
Great music, fantastic puppetry, it's an extremely fun movie. Both movies are worth seeing. Watch them back to back for the best experience.
You not only made a butcher out of me, but you drove my girl away.
Shut up and bring on the food!
It took this long to get to our first werewolf movie. It's very unfortunate it has to be another one of these Poverty Row movies from the 40s, though. So Revenge of the Mad Monster is about a mad scientist who succeeds in creating a serum that creates werewolves. He uses it on his dim-witted servant. I really hope the wolf in that cage isn't uncomfortable. Knowing the time period this film was produced, I don't trust these filmmakers with animal safety. Anyways, he plans to use the serum to create an army of super soldiers. It was the middle of World War II after all, but he's ridiculed and shunned by his peers. On subsequent nights, this man-wolf is allowed to wander the swamps and mess with the locals. If you've ever seen a Universal monster movie, it goes about as well as you'd expect. The man-wolf is chased around the swamp by an angry mob, the monster turns on his master, and it ends in a big fiery climax. It's got some things going for it. The man-wolf makeup looks okay. This guy just looks like he hasn't shaved in 5 years. I like the exterior scenes, they've got that spooky atmosphere to them. I like this lady.
No, you can't kill him no ways, except with a silver bullet.
She's a funny little goblin caught on film. The movie's just mediocre. It's moderately engaging, it's writing on a lot of monster movie tropes of the era, and it doesn't do much to distinguish itself. Next movie. Maniac from 1934, however, does very well in distinguishing itself from other films of its era, in that it's one of the earliest cases of a film that is so bad, so baffling in so many ways, that it's good. The film follows a crazy man who happens to also work for a crazy scientist.
Have you made arrangements? No.
Who is obsessed with bringing the dead back to life. One day, the scientist sends him to come back with a fresh body, but he comes back empty-handed.
Where is it?
Buddy, where do you think he's hiding the entire human body you told him to get? In his pocket? Anyways, the scientist tells him to shoot himself so he can be revived, but the crazy man refuses and kills the scientist instead. Being an aspiring actor, he assumes the mad scientist's identity. Then, a number of things happen. He injects a man with crazy juice.
Creeping through my veins.
He pops a cat's eyeball out and eats it. I hope that cat was actually missing an eyeball. He puts the body of the mad scientist inside the walls. He hatches a scheme with this lady. There's gratuitous nudity. The story of this movie is nonsensical. It takes elements from Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat, with the cat meowing giving away the body of the mad scientist at the end, but it's a very fleeting reference. Every actor brings something new to the table, a new brand of terrible performance.
I thought maybe, you might use them for, well, some experiments or something.
With lines like these, I don't blame them for having such a hard time.
She must have oxygen.
They even left in this close-up of a supposed corpse breathing. The film is randomly interrupted with these definitions of various psychosis. It even opens with a long foreword about mental health in the United States. While it is important that mental illnesses are something that should be properly examined, and the individuals afflicted given the sympathy and care they deserve, this film does not portray these illnesses with sympathy, instead opting for the sensationalist mad scientist stereotype, and having the crazy characters snorting like pigs. It's hypocritical, and the lack of awareness about the main point they were making elevates it to entertainment that it never intended. This movie is full of strange dialogue on top of terrible performances.
Once a ham, always a ham. You, an actor?
Maniac is a baffling movie, but because it's made with sincerity, it succeeds in being enjoyably terrible. It's the shortest movie of this video too, just 3 minutes shorter than Yucca Flats, so you can knock it out in less than an hour.
So, the rats eat the cat eat the rat, and I get the skin.
Of all the films included on this collection, Fritz Lang's Metropolis is the most bizarre inclusion. It's a movie that went on to influence countless works in science fiction. I mean, C-3PO is basically a de-bimbofied version of the robot from this movie. Or is it the other way around?
This oil bath is going to feel so good.
Anyways, this work influenced a lot in the science fiction genre, not horror. This is not a horror movie. Why is it not in this science fiction box set? Its status as a public domain film is dubious now too.
It was considered one at one point, but since it's erroneously here, I might as well look at it. Don't know any other time I could talk about it, and it deserves the attention. The film is set in a massive city separated by two classes, the workers in the underground and the rich elite who live above. The son of the head of the elite, Fritter, sees what life is like down below, and becomes sympathetic to the workers. And he falls in love with a woman from the depths named Maria. His father, Joe, catches wind of this, so he has a robot created by inventor Rotwang impersonate Maria, to sow seeds of distrust in the workers to justify an attack. Yet little does Joe know, Rotwang plans to use this fake Maria to incite violence on both the surface and the underground, as revenge. The visuals are as impressive as they are beautiful. Metropolis is a towering achievement in special effects and art design, heavily influenced by the German Expressionist movement, with its angled architecture that casts long, intersecting shadows. The themes of classism and use of biblical imagery can be a bit too on the nose. I mean, the film stops just so you get it, but goddamn, I can't not appreciate the work that went into conveying its ideas, all without sound too. It's a little more dialogue heavy than most silent films I've seen, but it is still able to communicate its ideas visually through its actors' exaggerated performances. For a long time, large chunks of this movie were considered lost, but it has since been fully restored. Gotta say, at nearly 2.5 hours, it does feel a little too long. In fact, the Mill Creek release contains a much shorter version, but this is a movie you need to see at least once in your life. Again, it's not public domain. Maybe, I'm still not so sure, but it can be easily viewed on YouTube and other places, if you know where to look. It's one of the most technically impressive films of the silent era. As far as I can tell from research, Monster from a Prehistoric Planet was never in the public domain, but it was thought to be, which is why it's on this box set. I'm not going to pass up the opportunity to talk about a kaiju movie though, so I'm going to review it anyways. It also gives me an excuse to not use the horrendous pan and scan of the movie that cuts off half the image. Monster from a Prehistoric Planet is the English dub of a Japanese film titled Gappa, the Triphibian Monster, released during the peak of Japan's kaiju boom. The same boom that brought us the Ultra series and Gamera. Boy, I can't wait to talk about Ultraman. Got so much to say about that series. I've seen nearly every show by now, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Monster from a Prehistoric Planet is a fucking bad name. These monsters technically are from the past, I mean by virtue of kind of being like dinosaurs, but they're not from another planet. I'll be using a higher quality transfer of the film, but just to make it harder on myself, I'll watch it with the dub.
Papa's mean! I don't like you anymore!
The helicopters are ready. They'll be here soon.
We're already here.
Okay, let's go.
An eccentric CEO, tell me if you've heard that one before, wants to take animals from a nearby island and bring them to Japan.
Right here. Here. Right here.
He sends a group of scientists to investigate the island, where they discover it's inhabited by a bunch of Japanese guys in brownface. I mean, native islanders. God damn it.
That's right. We're Japanese. How did you know?
Unfortunately, common thing in Showa-era kaiju films. During their expedition, they find a giant egg that has a baby Gappa inside it, which they bring back to Japan. Pretty wretched little creature.
G-A-P-P-A. Gappa.
With their baby taken from them, Gappa's parents are pissed off. As a matter of fact, they travel to Japan and go apeshit.
Maybe we did make a big mistake.
These kaiju attack scenes are the absolute highlight of the film. For being Nakatsu's only good kaiju production, they went all out on the production values for these scenes. With special effects directed by Toho movie veteran Akira Watanabe, these scenes are just as well executed as their contemporaries from rival studios. A couple pretty bad compositing shots, but the practical effects are on point, just peak tokusatsu. One bit of characterization from the monsters that I really like is that the parents don't get aggressive until the self-defense force makes them drop the octopus they were carrying. They were probably carrying it for their baby, you know, like for a snack. Even the other one's like, "Aw, shit, you've done it now." And that's when they start using their heat rays. Very similar effect to Godzilla's atomic breath, by the way. So the self-defense force brings in John McDonald from America.
Right, this gentleman is Dr. John McDonald from America.
Who brings in the little boy in brown face, who says to bring Gappa back to the island. He won't stop screaming Gappa either.
Gappa! 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 Gappa!
But yeah, Gappa the Triphibian monster is pretty good. There are a couple things I don't care for. The reporter character's entire arc is basically just her accepting her role as a housewife.
I've decided to quit my job. I'm just an ordinary woman. I should stay home, marry an office worker, and wash diapers.
Jesus Christ, I can't believe that came back. But other than that and the whole brown face thing, it's a pretty damn good time. I can't find a way to fit this into the script naturally, but there's this part in the English audio track where this little girl starts speaking Japanese. Oops. Not a terribly interesting human cast, but those tokusatsu sequences are just top-notch. Some very endearing monster characterization too. Watch the widescreen version of the film. But if you feel compelled to, there are a number of special effects scenes exclusive to the American cut that are absent from the Japanese version. Alright, that's enough fun. Back to the public domain.
Gappa! 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 Gappa!
Hey, yeah, I'm ending the video here. It's very unfortunate. I wanted to make this a big video, but I think YouTube likes it more if these are cut up into little pieces. They're still very long, but you know. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really, really appreciate it. Again, please give me some feedback in the comments. I really appreciate critique. Thank you.